Hi, welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn more about strings. String is an interesting data type. It's one of the most commonly used one, and there are a lot of built-in functions that make it very easy to work with strings. So we're going to see some examples of that in this video. Now, string is a very versatile data type. That's why it's very commonly used. Strings are immutable. We'll see an example and I will explain what it is. But just keep in mind that when you create a string or when you use a string value, it's allocated in memory. So it's saved in memory in some place. And that string itself is never updated. As and when you create new strings or new string values, they just are saved in different places in memory. A string value itself is never updated. It might be a little hard to grasp at this point, but just keep in mind that Python strings are immutable. I'll try to explain it a little bit with some example in this video. And as I said, there are a lot of built-in functions. We're going to see some examples of that here, but I have given a link to the documentation where you can go in and look at all the available built-in string methods. So when you're doing programming, by practice, you would remember some functions that you can use whenever there is a need. But if there is a need and you don't know of a function already, you can look up in documentation and then see if there is a method or function that's available that you can use for your purpose. So let's switch to terminal where we're going to see some examples. So we'll go into Python shell. You know how to create a new string, so you can say name equals Patrick. Now we can display the name by typing name. So we got the value back. Now I mentioned strings are immutable, right? So if you say name equals now John and display name, now name is John. Now this doesn't mean that the value Patrick got updated with John. Patrick and John are two different strings. They are allocated their own places in the memory. Name is just a variable which used to point to Patrick. Now it's pointing to John. This is the basic example of immutability. Just keep in mind that strings are immutable. As you do more and more programs, you will understand where that comes into play. So as I promised, we're going to look at some built-in functions. The simplest function is something called len, short for length, name. This displays the length of the string. So we got 4 because John has 4 letters. You could say name equals, again, Patrick. Now if you say len of name, you will now get 7 because Patrick is 7 length. There are other functions. So let's say we want to convert all the letters to uppercase. You can simply say name dot upper. You have to end it with parentheses because we are calling a function and functions always have parentheses. So now we updated all the letters to Patrick. If I display name again, we don't get the all uppercase one because when we did the name.upper, we just displayed the value in the console. We never updated name, the variable itself, with the new string. So this Patrick and this Patrick are two different strings in memory. And when we did name.upper, we just displayed it. Name variable is still pointing to the old one. And if you want to update it, you would do something like name equals name.upper. Now here we're doing the same function, but we are assigning the result back to name. Now if we display name, you get the uppercase. Now similarly, we can do name.lower, which will give you the name in all lowercase. So it basically converts the string to all lowercase. There are also functions like name.isUpper. As the function name says, it's going to check if all the letters all the characters in the string are uppercase, which is true because remember, when we did the name dot lower, we never assigned it back to name. So the name is still all uppercase Patrick. So when we do name dot is upper, we get true. So if we do name dot is lower, we should get false. And as expected, we got false. So those are the case ones. Now we can also check whether name is numeric. It's false because name contains Patrick, all alphabets. There are no numbers in there. It will have to be all numbers for this function to return true. So we can define a new variable called age, which we would normally store in as an integer, but just for this example, we will save it as numbers. So it's a string but contains all numbers. Now if we do age dot is numeric on this one, we get true because although it's a string, it has only numbers, so is numeric is returning true here. Now we can do some more examples. So let's say str equals, let's define a string with a lot of spaces, and then sample string space space space. So there are what's called leading spaces and trailing spaces. So we can display this and it will display with the spaces. Now what if we want to remove all the leading and trailing spaces? There is a simple function to do it, which is called strip. So when we do str.strip, it removes the leading and trailing spaces and gives you just the sample string. You can do str.rstrip, which gives you a result string that has the trailing spaces removed, but the leading space is intact. Similarly, if you do str.elstrip, which stands for left strip, as you might expect, the leading spaces are now gone, but the trailing spaces are intact. And finally, you can do a find, right? So you can do str.find, let's say LE. Now before I run it, I'll explain what I'm trying to do. So str has the string, right? We never updated it. Now I'm asking Python to find the first occurrence of LE. So as you can see, LE is here. Type, it's saying it's at position 7. Now let's count. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So L is actually in the 8th position, but we got 7. Why is that? This is where the concept of indices or index comes in. So indices always start at 0. The first index is not 1. The first index, an index means just the position, right? So the position or index always starts at 0. And this is common in pretty much all programming languages. It might be a little bit confusing, but once you kind of start practicing this, it'll be easy to remember. So indices always start at 0. Now if we start from 0, obviously L is in the 7th position, which is why we got 7 here. We can do some more examples to understand this concept of indices, right? So I'm going to define another string 2 equals, again, John, Alex. So now let's try to find the length of it, which is string 2, which has 9, which is correct. So 4, 4, and the space is 9. If I do string 2 square bracket 0, so the difference between square bracket and this bracket is this bracket parenthesis you will use for functions, and when you use a square bracket you are mentioning a position, right, the index. So I'm asking for the character in the 0th position in string 2. and we got j. So as I explained earlier, indices always start at 0. So in this string, the 0th position character is j. We can do something like string 2, and if I give 3 colon, it's going to start at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So the character in the third position or third index is n. And if I give a colon and that's it and press enter, I'm going to get everything from n. So starting at position 3 to the end of the string. So I got starting at n, got the whole thing. Now if I want a specific set of characters, so let's say I want from n space and then a, that's it. So I will give something like string 2, 3 colon. So it starts at 3, 4, 5. So I want till 5, 3 to 5, but I cannot give 5 here. So let me give 5 and see what the output is. I'm going to get n and space. So a is not returned because the way the ending position works. So this is the starting position, this is the ending position. Starting position always starts at the number you give, right? So 3 is where we want to start, and sure enough, it started at 3. But then ending is always the character that you, or the position that you don't want, right? The position that is next to the position you want. So to explain with example, so I want 3, 4, 5, which means I have to give 6. Might be a little bit confusing. Again, if you practice, this will be second nature to you. If we do 3 colon 6, now I got n space a. So just remember that the ending position is always the position next to, up to the point that you want. So those are some of string example. As you can see, there's quite a bit. I hope you were able to kind of understand how the functions are helpful. But as I always say, practice is what's key here. I would like you to try these examples yourselves and go to the documentation link I gave. Find other string functions that are there so you can practice them as well. Because when you are programming, you will constantly be in need to do some operations, and it's always a good practice to find documentation, see if there are built-in functions available to accomplish what you're trying to do. That's how you can learn about new things, new functions, because the Python language has a lot of built-in functions, not just for strings, but for many other things. So thanks for watching the video. Keep practicing. See you in the next one.